Hey guys, and welcome back to So, What Do You Do Again? Today I'm joined with Isadora Alvarez, the founder and designer of Backbeat Co. Isadora lives in California, so I'm currently interviewing her remotely, so my apologies if the audio isn't as crisp as usual. All right. Thank you so much again for being here. I'm really excited to go into this and dive into Backbeat.
Thank you for having me. Such an
Oh, of
honor.
course.
I feel like you picked like the coolest girl, so I am so honored to be here.
I'm more honored. You're more of a cool girl than me. Okay, so we're gonna dive right in. So you were born in the Philippines and grew up on the
hmm
island of Palawan. Tell me about that experience.
It's
Like,
beautiful. Yeah, so gosh, where do I even start with that? So I grew up in an island in the Philippines, and my parents loved them to death. Built us a house far away from the center of a town. So just imagine where it's already an island in in the Philippines in like the 90s, early 2000s, whatever. And it didn't have a lot to begin with in terms of like modern day technology. So my brothers and I had to be very imaginative when it came to entertaining ourselves. So my fondest memories would always involves being outdoors. So our summers on, you know, more remote islands, climbing trees, making our own kites and mud fights, and riding on BMX trails, just living that good old provincial life.
oh my God, I wish that was what I grew up on. I feel
You
like
know, when you were young, you're kind of like, oh, I'm so bored. Like, what am I gonna do? But then looking back, those were literally like the best days of my life. Like just being out and just running around and just being free.
most definitely. I feel like I did a lot of that. Like we would just go into our backyard and pretend we were in like a crazy jungle and it was the best thing of my life. And
Yes,
looking back, I'm
totally.
like that imagination was great.
Yeah, no, it's really great. Like you don't really get that nowadays. I feel like everything's like given to you, so you don't really have to think. And I
Exactly.
feel like having that when I was a kid has been, very, very helpful in my adult life.
And
Yeah.
growing up in this remote island, was there a moment where you knew that you wanted to work in the world of fashion, or were you kind of just like in it for the long haul? You thought you were going to stay on the island forever and maybe do something
No.
so completely different?
No, I always knew I was gonna get out of that island. I had big girl dreams and and a small island life. So I think a couple of things kind of inspired me. My mom was very much into books, and she's passed that on to me. And I remember one day finding this like book about all the 90s supermodels. So, like Naomi, Claudia, and Cindy Crawford and just their lives. So I thought that was like super interesting and super glamorous. And I was just like, oh, there's like this whole industry, you know, out in the world that is fashion.
Definitely.
So I got like that kind of like piqued my interest. And then when I was also a teenager, we didn't really have any clothing stores in the island. So you'd have to go if you really wanted to go real shopping, you would have to take a plane ride to Manila, which is like the center of the
Wow.
Philippines.
So were
Yeah.
all your clothes like handmade?
So no, so we would just do trips out to Manila. So I was born in Manila, and then when I was like 3, we moved to Palawan. And then so if we wanted to experience city life, we would have to take a trip. Like we would have to have a vacation in Manila, and then do all our shopping and whatnot out there.
Oh my
So
God.
it's pretty crazy. Like now looking back, it didn't seem like crazy back then, but it's pretty crazy. Anyway, so I don't really have any clothing stores in the island that, fit my style. So I was going, and I remember I was going through a Gwen Stefani obsession because I love No
Yeah.
Doubt. And I was
I feel like
watching,
everyone
and
went
I
through
was
that.
watching a lot of, yeah, and I was watching like a lot of MTV on our satellite TV because we lived on a mountain basically and didn't have cable TV or internet.
Oh my God. On
Yeah.
repeat.
Yeah, so just imagine that. And it was MTV Asia. in like Malaysia or something like that, something really funny. So, and I wanted like a pair of wide leg pants so bad. I think it was probably like the Jinko jeans.
Iconic.
Yeah. So I went to public school in the island and we had uniforms. So the only times that we could wear our own clothes if it was like our Christmas party. So I really, really wanted like a pair of red jeans for a Christmas party, but I couldn't find it. So I had this idea that I was just going to learn how to sew. So I asked my mom if I could take sewing and pattern making lessons from a local seamstress, and I did. And I made those pants, and I wore them to our Christmas
Oh,
party.
man.
And I think that was
I hope you
like
have a picture of that.
that.
Like, do you still?
You know what? I don't. I
I'm sure it's
probably
floating somewhere.
I probably have those pants somewhere because I've kept a lot of things. So if I really want to look for it, I'll probably be able to find it. And I remember not throwing those away because those were like the first ever, that was the first thing that I
Created,
ever.
like made, yeah.
So yeah. So I think that was kind of like my little start. Like I had it in my mind that there's like a fashion industry out there and I wanted to be part of it. And that was kind of like, the little start onto like me trying to do that in the
Yeah, and then
future.
you immigrated to the USA when you were 23 years old. How did you cope with one being so far away from home and also kind of restarting this new chapter in your life?
Yeah, that was hard. When you're 23, you're quote unquote older, so you're pretty much like settled into like in my case, in my
Mm-hmm.
Asian ways. So moving from Asia and the Philippines is a very conservative country. It's still, I think, the only Roman Catholic country left
Mm-hmm.
in the world. So there's a lot of like restrictions and how a woman should act and dress and all those things. It's still a very patriarchal society. That took a lot, and then I moved to SF, which was like a huge culture
That's
shock.
like from literally two different sides of the world. Like it's
Literally from like not wanting, like not being comfortable with your body because you had to be like conservative and whatever, and then going to San Francisco where I would go to school at like 9 o'clock and see somebody naked on the street, which was like totally normal.
and everyone is so
So
used to it.
exactly. So that took a lot of adjusting and just like opening my mind to everything. I remember when I moved, my parents would actually text me every day, and when I wouldn't answer, they would start calling my aunt
Oh
and my
no.
boyfriend to see where I was. Like that's how
They're
sheltered
like,
I
it's been
was
5 minutes. I haven't heard from
until I was
her.
23. And literally after like an hour, they would start calling everybody. And I remember my boyfriend, who's now my husband, he's American, and he was just like, "Hey, your mom's trying to call me. What's
You're
going
like, oh
on?"
shit, not again.
Yeah.
This is the fifth time that's happened all in the last 2 days.
Yeah. So I came from like a very sheltered like life, and then moving to SF, that was a
So why
huge
did you
change for
choose to
sure.
move to San Francisco?
I always knew deep inside that I was gonna try to live in a different country, and I wanted to move to California because I always had like this idea that California was so cool, palm trees, beaches, and skaters. But obviously, I moved to the wrong part
Mm-hmm.
of California at first because
It's
SF
not
is not any of that.
the
Uh,
breeding ground.
it's cold, but the reason why I moved to SF was that my mom, it was the easiest way because my mom's sister was there, so I lived with her for like a couple months while I got myself just situated, and then I also went to school at the Academy of Art for fashion merchandising.
After graduating, what was the first step that you did? Did you
Mhm.
go on to go into a full-time career?
Yeah, so basically, so let's show a little bit of a backstory. I had a small independent shop in Manila when I lived there because I really had like this idea that I wanted to create like a brand and have all of these things. But the fashion industry in Manila is a little bit, back then, was a little bit different. Was that if you had a fashion business, it meant like it was more like a bespoke kind of fashion business where people ran ateliers and then you met with a designer and they made stuff
Mm-hmm.
specifically for you. So I kind of had that, but I wasn't really. I didn't really enjoy that. I really wanted like to create like a fashion brand and have like a story behind it instead of catering to like a single
Got it.
customer every single time. I had that in the back of my mind when I went back to school, because I went to school for design first in the Philippines, and then I was just like, all right, if I want to have a brand, I also really need to learn about like the business side of things. So went to school for that, went to school for merchandising in San Francisco. And then after that, kind of went on to working for companies in the buying department because I felt like that would be a useful tool for me when I started my business.
And how long did you like stay in those positions as a buyer?
So I worked for, and this is kind of like how Backbeat started. I worked for an off price retailer right out of school. And I worked there for, I think, close to 3 years. And that's kind of when I saw how wasteful the industry was in terms of,
Yeah.
especially like the off price industry, where, they buy things for $2
hmm
and sell them for like $13.99. And you know that that stuff is not going to last you
hmm
years. It's going to last you like 6 months. I was in the handbag department, and literally we would open the boxes and it would stink of like chemicals, and it was a lot of plastic. It was a lot of PU, which
Oh,
is like fake
wow.
leather. I would do store visits, and I literally would see stuff that we had just put in the floor maybe like 6 months ago already starting to like disintegrate.
So you really just saw firsthand
Yeah.
completely how wasteful this industry can truly be, which is scary. It's scary.
Yeah, I feel like we've shifted in a, for some reason, as humanity has shifted into like cheap, 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 and more, more, more.
I think
So
it's also like the
that was
culture
kind of
of
like eye opening.
like think about it when you think of Amazon, like you're getting things the next day, sometimes same day, which is
I,
wild.
as a small business owner, I have a lot of things to
Definitely,
say
because
about
it
that.
makes consumers are starting to get like you're trained to think, oh, of course I can get this today. Like Amazon's doing
hmm
it, why can't you? When you realize
Yep.
that it's trickling down into
Yep.
every single part of the supply chain and it's hurting everyone. But regardless, we're going to go back. I
Yep.
always do this. I always
Oh
get
yeah.
off topic.
Don't even get me started about this whole Amazon thing, because that is something that we discuss in the studio all the time. And I think we're on a path right now where we're kind of veering away from that, at least for the most part. My customer base are starting to understand it more. So I'm really happy that we're in some way kind of restructuring. But yes, there's still a lot of things to be.
So when you started to see all the wastefulness in your past position and just seeing what the fashion industry was
Mhm.
producing, that was the moment that kind of birthed Backbeat Co.
Yes. So basically, well, yes and no. I knew I wanted to start my own label, but just didn't really know at that point what it was going to be like, and what I was going to stand for. But then I also didn't have a lot of pride in my job. Like, I love the people that I worked with. The company was great to work for, but ultimately, like, the product that we were, you know, selling was not something that I was like excited to talk
hmm
about or like brag about that I was doing. It just didn't sit well with who I was. So after I think around the close to the third year, I was just like, I just have to do this. I don't know what I'm gonna do yet, but I also cannot stay in this industry any longer. So I am just gonna do my own thing and figure things out. At that point, I had been living in LA for a couple of years, so my love for vintage had been rekindled back in the Philippines. You know how now you've heard that all like the excess of like goodwill and
Yes, of
whatnot gets
course.
sent to like developing countries. So I used to shop. I used to thrift a lot in the Philippines. I would go to like, it was called ukay ukay in the Philippines, which is like a kind of like warehouses. So I rekindled that love here in LA because it's just vintage paradise out here. So I started buying vintage and just pop up in flea markets every weekend and try to figure out from then what I was going to do. And so when I was doing that, I saw that I was focusing more on like the basics like cool tees and sweatshirts and like denim. So from then on, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna have a brand. It's gonna be like these things because this is like I feel like my strength, and these are also the things that I wear on in my everyday life, and I feel like it's
Mm-hmm.
very much like a California look. And then at the very start, that was like the whole start of like the true cost of fashion, all those like documentaries just exposing,
Mm-hmm.
how bad the industry is. So I made a promise to myself that I was going to try my very best to have a low impact. So I started off saying, what is it that I can do on my end at this point where I'm such a small brand still that can make me have a lower impact? And I figured that that was through like the fabrics that I was going to use and not using plastic when, shipping stuff and all of those things, making sure we don't use harmful chemicals when it came to dyes and treatments and all those stuff.
Recently, I would say about 6 months ago, I really like it dawned on me the amount of chemicals that go into our clothes. Someone came in to speak to my
Mm-hmm.
job, and she was talking about like how much like your jeans go through so many different processes and how formaldehyde is used, and just down to every single piece that you're
Yep.
wearing, even your workout clothes, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're sweating in those chemicals into your bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, holy shit, like how
Yeah.
can you avoid this? Like honestly, it kind of gets a little daunting because you realize almost everything you own, there's a harmful chemical involved, and it's out of your control. And I
Yep.
really commend you for taking these
Mm-hmm.
steps and in your own line to make sure that you don't use these harmful chemicals.
And it's not just on us. I feel like we get so very little of those harmful chemicals because
Mm-hmm.
it's already like set in the yarn and whatnot. What the most important thing for me was that the workers who are handling
Yes,
all the dyes
exactly.
and chemicals. If I was gonna make a t-shirt, and just like a random example, I wanted to make this sweatshirt and I wanted it to have like a vintage fade. And so when I was talking to the dye house, I was just like, okay, how do we make this? And he was saying that, oh, we can only use potassium spray, and potassium is very harmful. It's a very harmful chemical, especially for the one spraying it. And I was just like, no, I don't want to do that. There's probably another way that we can achieve this effect without harming, whoever's handling it. And so we came up with like, instead of using potassium, we'd spray it with like white dye, but do it in a very
Mm-hmm.
subtle way to give it like that faded look. And we were able to achieve like that vintage fade without actually using a potassium spray.
It comes down to like laziness. Like I think there's so many alternatives that we can do that goes into our
Mm-hmm.
clothing, but a lot of brands are kind of just set in their ways and are like, oh no, this is the only way we can do it. And they don't tend to challenge it because why should they, right? Like,
Well, it's also hard. Like, yeah, I get it. It's hard. Like, I had such a hard time when I started because it literally, I would be like, can we do this? And everybody's like, nope, we can't. And I had to like really push and build relationships with like mills and, dye houses to be able to kind of also change their mindset on how to do
I
things.
feel like everyone is in some sort trying to, at least like some major brands that I know of, like are trying to really take some steps in becoming more sustainable and more hyper aware of our
Hmm.
environment. But it's like you're kind of restarting, right? You're kind of restarting your whole brand. And
That's why I said from the start, we set these guidelines so that when we grow, it's not hard for us to like pivot. We're already doing it. Because I feel like that's where sometimes people don't change just because they've already done it for so long, and they've already, like, going back to a different way of life is a lot
mhm.
more difficult and a lot more expensive than just continuing what they're already doing.
And does there, for like the name Backbeat Co., does that stem from like your philosophy of like sustainability and reuse, like making sure every part of your product is chemical free, etc.?
No, it's actually they're so random. I don't even remember how we got to Backbeat. I just remember that me and my husband were thinking of names, and we went into a rabbit hole. Just like I don't honestly, people ask me this all the time. I'm so like ashamed to say, but I don't remember how we got to backbeat. But I remember seeing that a backbeat is like an accentuation of a beat, so it
Got
gives
it.
the beat a little kick. So it's mostly found in like old school R&B and rock music, and I thought that was like kind of apt for what I was trying to do, was that,
Got it.
basics but with a
No, I
little
like
kick.
that. No, I love
So I
that.
used backbeat.
Because you were Backbeat Rags, and then you kind of rebranded to Backbeat Co.
Mhm.
Can you tell me why and
Yeah.
like how's that
I mean,
process been? Like, was it
mhm.
hard to let go of the old name?
I don't think so. I We were Backbeat Rags because we also started off as a vintage.
Hmm.
I started off selling vintage, so that was kind of like how that all started. And then as we kind of veered away from vintage and making our own stuff, and we're getting into like a little bit more of like an elevated look, so I felt like it was time to let go of Rags and just do Backbeat Co. And we're also trying to get into a lot more different categories, so I wanted kind of a more general name
Got it.
instead of being very specific. Thank
How
you.
does your heritage influence your designs?
I think more my growing up in an island influences my designs than my actual heritage of being Filipino, just because in the island, the heat was like a huge thing. And so fabric and feel of the clothing, fabric feel and the ease of clothing is like a big influence on how we design. It needs to be comfortable, it can't be too fussy, and most importantly, your body needs to breathe. I feel like for us, it's very important. And a lot of our customers come back because that's how they feel in our
And I
clothes.
know, and you mentioned this earlier, how you kind of draw a lot from the nostalgic themes of vintage and old school California surf and skate culture for your design. Like,
Hmm.
what really, like, why do you gravitate towards these themes?
I think it's all about the vibe for me. Like California in the 70s were just all about having this easy, sunshine filled life filled with like days of hanging out and skating and surfing, especially like, if I think about Venice Beach in like the 70s. I'm heavily inspired by that like life where everything is just easy, and go to the beach, hang out, throw on a sweatshirt,
And is
that
that
kind
kind
of
of what your
thing.
lifestyle is right now? Or is it a little bit more hectic?
I try.
That's literally, I guess,
On the
like
weekends
everyone
I
on the
try.
East Coast, it's like all what we imagine people in California do. It's like it's like you guys are just relaxing.
I mean, we do. We do, and I feel like even in my studio, it's very relaxed where, come in between 9 to 10, finish your work. If you need to leave, you can leave. I'm not the type of person that you have to be here from 9 to 5, even if there's nothing to do, because we need to pretend that we're working. I definitely
Yeah.
do not subscribe to that way of life. So, in that sense, I feel like a lot of the brands that I know are kind of like that out here in the West Coast. Also, because it's like endless
Very
sunshine.
jealous of
So, you
that.
kind
It's
of also want to go
freezing right
outside.
now. It's freezing, it's rainy, snowy. There was like ice falling down from the sky earlier. Like it's just I'm
I'm
from
so
Florida,
sorry.
so I literally, this is
I
my
feel bad
what,
for you.
fourth winter. It's still just as terrible as the first. I'm getting used to it. I feel like everyone's trying to get me to come to Cali. I'm
Oh
like, that
my gosh.
sunshine is
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm really, it's nice.
It's very enticing. Yeah. I had a choice between after San Francisco if I wanted to move to New York or LA, and
Yeah,
I
you're
kind of
like,
had to choose LA because
actually,
of the
I
weather.
could visit New York sometimes, be bi-coastal. Especially during this time, like we're constantly being fed information, constantly fed creative processes, like seeing imagery, like from advertisements, just like on our social media, on our phone, to like just walking down the street, you see so many ads pop up and you see so many other people's work. How do you
Yeah.
stay inspired?
This has been like a work in progress for me this year because, running a business and doing the day to day is also very, very tough, and staying inspired while dealing with the non fun aspects of the business kind of
Mm-hmm.
makes leaves me uninspired all the time. I really try to make it a point that I go out in nature. I go to the beach, go to the flea market, and I read a lot of books. I feel like, whenever you're on your phone and looking at inspiration like all day, I feel like I'm drained after. But when I'm looking at inspiration and like books and going outside and looking at people and just enjoying like the day, that leaves me more inspired than scrolling
Oh,
endlessly.
definitely. I was talking to my friend and I remember I was like, yeah, I was just saying how like I got on the train. It was super early. It was like 7 a.m. and you just look around, everyone's on their phone. It's crazy. Everyone's on their phone. But also like
Hmm.
that's so a part of our culture now. And
Yeah,
it's like you can't really put it down on anyone. It's just like kind of finding that balance.
it is.
And I just wanted to circle
It
back
is. Yeah.
onto like talking about Backbeat sustainable practices. I wanted to know like well more so ask like how, if you have any insight or advice on how other designers and slash or brands could make strides in making their business more eco-conscious, whether they're just starting out or kind of in the middle of, their
Hmm.
brands and building their brand.
So on our end, I still think we're not. I don't want to call. I'm kind of like veering away from calling ourselves sustainable because the longer that I am in this industry, and the more things I do, I can say
Hmm.
that we can't be 100% sustainable. So I think what we're trying to do now is that
Got it.
we're just trying to have a lower impact, which is, through our fabric selection, we only use hemp, organic cotton, recycled cotton, Tencel, and we also make sure we don't use harmful dyes and chemicals. We don't use plastic bags when packing our clothes and in the studio. And we also cut small quantities and just recut styles when we need to so that we eliminate waste. It's a lot more expensive this way, but I'm okay, sleeping at night knowing we're not doing the worst things. As as for advice on starting brands, I would just say do the best that you can to be more have a lower impact. It's hard, but it's also doable, I think. And just make sure that you do it from the start. I'm just like, I wish I could say something more profound, but I mean, that's basically it. Like, it just in a simple way, if you don't like, I don't have a lot of funding, so I can't be like, I'm going to be 100% like closed loop and recycle everything. Like, we're just not. I'm just going to be honest about that. But we're just
And
trying
that's
the best that
important
we
still because
can.
you're trying. There's so many other brands that could care less. Like there's like Fashion
Yeah.
Nova who knocks off something
Yeah.
in like less than 6 hours, which is
God.
insane. I'm like, how are you guys doing this? Going back to your brand, I think it's amazing with the strides in what you're doing. Yeah, you don't have to be completely sustainable. I don't think that's what a
Yeah.
lot of people expect from each and every brand. It's more so about the practices and also speaking on these practices because your customers are going to recognize that and really appreciate it and appreciate your part in
Yeah.
keeping us more eco-conscious. And you mentioned about funding, like how do you find funding? Because I sat down with my friend Sade. She owns a small business called EDOS. She was on the podcast as well, and she was talking about how like as a small business it's really hard to find funding like her herself she's been self-funded.
Yes, so this is something that I wish I also knew when and nobody really talks about this a lot. And it's kind of like a trick for people who want to start their businesses because they see all these brands that have a lot of funding just like come out of nowhere, and they're just like, oh, like that's so cool, I can do that. But then it's not really talked about that they get like VC funding, or they are bought by like or they're backed by like a really big company, and that's why they're able to do all of this all at once. um which is not my case. I When I first started, used my savings, I cashed in my stocks and my 401k and kind of just started from there. I did have to raise friends and family last
Now
year.
what would be, I guess, your next step for Backbeat, both like on the sustainable front, like trying to be a little like the next strides from past from what you already are doing, like being more eco-conscious, and also in the sense of like getting more
So
funding. Sorry.
So you're asking all the no, that this is great because I always, whenever I listen to a podcast now, I'm very like weary. I'm like, are they really telling all the truths about where they started, how they started? Yeah, because yeah, you get all these like, which is there. It's fine. It's totally like that's how they started. I'm not taking it away from anybody, but there's also this misconception that starting and running a
Mm-hmm.
business is quote unquote easy when it's really not. Like you really need, and especially in this day and age where there's so much competition, you really, really need to have like a good
Yeah.
product plus also money. Like that's just the reality of it. What's next for Backbeat Co. in terms of what we're trying to do to further being a low impact company is that we're in the midst of talking to a company that can take our old clothes and textiles
Wow.
and recycle the yarn back into new yarn. So that's something that I'm really, really excited about. And I'm actually going to go to New York to kind of check out their facilities because
How
I
they do
want to
it.
see
Oh, that's
firsthand
incredible.
how they do it. Yeah, so hopefully we'll be able to figure it out soon. I'm always just looking for new ways and how we can
Got
make
it.
ourselves better in terms of our impact. So
Ah,
that's like big 2020 goals. In terms of funding, we're just going to try to keep it as small as possible for now. I feel like huge growth is also kind of going against like creating less waste. So we're still trying to find like the balance of like how much growth do we want, but also at the same time keep our
which
impact
makes
low.
complete sense. I love like speaking to you one and
Yeah.
also understanding more about the process with Backbeat because it truly is a whole cycle for you guys. Like everything makes sense, everything aligns, and you're very true
Hmm.
to what you preach, and also it's so clear about your story,
I
which
try.
is great. Yeah, no, you're killing it, girl. um when did you when did you first feel that you were like a voice for the Asian American and Pacific Islander community? Because I know when I started like in my position and like getting a little bit more, awareness around who I was and what I was doing, it was a little bit like, whoa, this is
Hmm.
a whole new type of pressure. You feel more eyes on you, feel more like people
Yeah.
expect a little bit more from you.
When I started getting, I forget what publication it was that included me in like an Asian American, I wouldn't say personalities, but like
Like a
people.
roundup.
Yeah, exactly. I was just like, whoa, it's so funny because I'm so focused on the business and like just what we're doing here that I'm out of touch of like the bigger picture and how
Mm-hmm.
people also see that I'm a woman of color and I'm Asian American. I'm actually I'm Asian. um, I started getting like DMs from my fellow Filipinos saying that they're super inspired because you don't really see a lot of Filipinos in the fashion space being like celebrated. So I thought that was really cool.
Who would you say is the Backbeat customer?
She's definitely the Backbeat customer is definitely a no fuss person who wants to be comfortable all the time, but
Yeah,
also look,
a little laid
cool.
back,
She wants to sweat through, but it
effortless.
just needs. Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. I always get asked this question. I'm always just like, she just wants to be comfortable, but also look cool at the same time. Also because like our stuff is super comfortable that you don't feel like you're trying to fix yourself all the time. You just like put it on,
Yeah, it's
you walk
easy.
out the
Also, it's
door and you
really
feel
good
good.
fabric. No, honestly, like I remember like just putting it on.
Thank you.
It's kind of like a crop top and it's a rust colored. And I just remember putting it on and being like,
Hmm.
damn, this is soft. Like, like wow. That's like my favorite times to like wear something.
And when you wear something like that and you immediately feel good, then you're just gonna feel good the rest of the day. And that kind of also like goes beyond like, you just true like how do I say it? What's the English word for it? Like you just you just feel like you're comfortable and you're cool because you feel good inside, you know? And that's kind of like what we're trying to do is that we don't have to be like super complicated. It doesn't have to be
Just be
like over the
easy.
top. You feel good in it, then you're gonna
There's
look.
so many times where, I try to wear something different, but I'm not necessarily comfortable, but I still leave my house because I'm like, no, let me just try it. And then I get
Hmm.
outside and I'm like, wait, I feel fucking crazy. Like
Right.
I gotta go back, like you hate those moments because that could really ruin your
Yeah.
whole day.
Yep. And you're thinking about it the whole day and you get insecure about like how you
Literally, that's
feel and
like
how you look and
me
it's just a
24/7.
spiral
I,
from
I
there.
wore
So
like these like really big flared jeans and I wore boots that I've been dying to wear, but I just had nothing to wear. But then upon like leaving, I realized that the boots were too short for the jeans. I was like, oh great. Now people could see top of my
oh
like
no.
calf. Like this is terrible.
And they're like that girl and her like
I know. Her boots do not match. Like, what is going on? But like, no one's
but
thinking that.
yeah,
It's just,
they're not
yeah. So
hitting at the
that's like
right
my
point.
24/7 thoughts. Okay, fun questions. Fun questions. I guess dream person that
Hmm.
you would want to see in your clothing, like anyone.
Bad gal Riri.
Oh yeah, she would kill that.
Yeah, I feel like she's
She
just
knows
like
everything.
she just has so much swag that it's just I am a huge fan.
It's insane. Like anytime she drops a video or posts anything, I'm like, I just like your kid. Like it's game over for everyone else. Like
Exactly.
like no one else should post. Like it should just be you. Like the content should be only Bad Gal Riri.
And I
Moving.
feel like she just has like this just her vibe is like super duper dope and like puts on it even if she puts on like the biggest baggiest t-shirt, it's gonna look good on her. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
Rihanna is
Sometimes I'm
never
like, this is kind of an ugly ass outfit, but you make it look so good, and I
exactly.
want it. But yeah, that's
Exactly.
what you want.
If you see it on somebody else, you're like, mm-mm, but with her, it's just like,
Yeah.
yes, I want that.
If you weren't working in fashion and being a designer and doing what you're doing right now, what would you be doing?
I would be doing something with food because I am food obsessed.
Do you cook a lot?
I don't cook a lot because I don't have time because this
But
business.
like you
Yeah,
essentially would.
I would, or I think my dream job would be like a food, like how
Critic?
no, not a food critic. Like Anthony
Oh.
Bourdain was like, I would just travel and
Oh.
eat everything and just sample cuisine from like different parts of the world. I'm very interested
Listen,
in
you can do it.
culture and food because like a lot of the Filipino traditions and a lot of our a lot of our
Hmm.
we center a lot around food in the Philippines.
I'm Haitian, so growing up, I really only ate Haitian food. It was up until like I got to college where I started to really look outside and be like, oh, what is this? What is that? I've never
Hmm.
had grits before. Never had oysters. I was just very like set in what my parents gave me.
Yeah,
And now I'm like obsessed with food too. One,
yeah.
I'm not good at cooking, but that's fine. I watch a lot of the Great British Bake Off, and
A
I
lot of people
definitely
have been
think I'm
telling
a
me to watch
pastry chef
that.
now. I'm a pastry chef now. Since watching it, I've won a pie contest.
Oh,
So I think
okay.
I
Next
have not shut
career.
up about this pie contest. Everyone's like, you need to calm down. It was one contest.
Now I need to see a picture of this pie.
Oh, wait, I'll send it to you. I
Okay,
got
cool.
a whole like sash and everything.
Yeah, but I feel like also with food, it's a lot of the history of like a nation or a culture. You can also find that in the food. Like for example, in the Philippines, like we had a lot of we were colonized by Spain for 300 something years. And then, we had a lot of trade with Malaysia and China. So a lot of like our food is a mix of all these like cultures, which I
Got
think
it,
is
yeah.
super interesting.
Man, I think you know, You should
I
still do something with that.
should.
That should be your side hobby, because God knows you need one more thing to add to your plate.
I know, and God knows I need to eat more.
Same. I mean, right now, because it's holiday season, all we have is chocolate at the office. I think the
Oh
only thing I've
gosh.
eaten today is a smoothie and about 5 pounds of chocolate.
Oh
And
my god.
I regret it, but I'm also like thankful for it because I do love chocolate. I have a sweet tooth. I don't have any like self-control. That's
Oh,
the issue.
same. Hard same.
Okay, a few more questions and then I'm
Yeah,
out of your hair.
no problem.
Um, would you ever be open to collaborating with any other designers?
Hell yeah. Well, mostly I would say there's this one brand. Go out and say I'm obsessed with Vans. Vans, are you out
Nice.
there?
I'm gonna
I'd
send it to the
really,
Vans PR. Like,
yes,
listen
please.
to this.
It's just because Vans is just like California. That's it.
Oh, you can so manifest. You can so manifest. You can so manifest. You can so